Many walk through this life believing the world is filled only with good-hearted souls. And while kindness indeed blooms in many hearts, the truth is more subtle. Along our path, we sometimes encounter those whose intentions are not pure, individuals who wear the masks of friendship, family, or trust, yet quietly work to erode our spirit, happiness, and inner peace. They do not always strike loudly. Often, their harm is slow, hidden behind smiles and gentle words, until we find ourselves doubting, hurting, and losing the light within. To recognize the signs of such toxic presence is not an act of judgment, but an act of compassion, a sacred duty to protect the sanctuary of your own heart. Today, dear one, let us walk together through the wisdom that helps us see clearly, guard our peace, and walk our journey unshaken. If these teachings resonate with you, I invite you to stay until the end, leave your reflections in the comments, and join this community of awakening hearts by subscribing. Together, let us learn to honor and protect the sacred light within us all. 14 signs you are dealing with a toxic person. 1. Using your weaknesses against you. Of all the subtle poisons that corrode the human heart, the act of using another's vulnerability against them is among the most grievous. It is a quiet betrayal that wounds not merely the mind, but the spirit itself. In the teachings of the Buddha, we are reminded that each being carries seeds of both suffering and awakening. Our insecurities, our old scars, are but the marks of samsara, the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, shaped by past ignorance and clinging. To exploit these tender places is not only an act of cruelty, it is a profound ignorance of the sacredness of another's journey. When a person seeks out your wounds, your hidden fears, your unspoken sorrows, and turns them into weapons against you, know that it is their own blindness that speaks. They are lost in the illusion of separation, believing that to diminish another is to elevate themselves. Yet in truth, as the Dhammapada teaches, by harming others, one harms oneself. No true peace can ever arise from causing pain. Those who use your weaknesses against you are often skilled in the art of silent warfare. They remember your moments of doubt, your stories whispered in trust, and later wield them like knives, cutting not to heal but to dominate. A simple mistake you once confessed is thrown back at you. A fear you once admitted is now painted as proof of your inadequacy. Over time, this erosion of confidence can make you question even your own worth, like a tree, battered by unseen winds, that forgets its own roots. But dear one, remember, what is wounded within you is not your true self. It is only the temporary form shaped by conditions, not the timeless awareness that observes without judgment. Just as a lotus rises unblemished from muddy waters, so too can you rise from the judgments and manipulations of others. To guard yourself, practice mindful discernment. The Buddha advised, associate with the wise, avoid the foolish. Be cautious with whom you entrust the tender seeds of your heart. Share your vulnerabilities only with those who hold them as sacred, not those who would scatter them to the winds for their own gain. And even when betrayed, do not close your heart in bitterness. Instead, strengthen it with wisdom. Know that those who seek to control others are themselves trapped, prisoners of fear, desperate to escape their own inner emptiness. Let compassion arise, not naive trust, but a deep understanding. Those who harm others are already suffering greatly. Do not let their darkness enter your own mind. Protect your peace as you would protect a flame in a storm. Walk onward with dignity, your spirit unbowed, for the light of your true nature can never be taken from you by the ignorance of another. Thus, through mindful awareness and compassion rightly placed, we free ourselves from the snares of manipulation and continue the journey toward liberation, serene, steadfast, and whole. 2. Not happy for your success. In this fleeting world, where joy and sorrow intermingle like shadows at twilight, One of the more sorrowful sights is to encounter those who cannot rejoice in another's good fortune. Rather than celebrating the blossoming of a fellow being, they allow the weeds of envy to take root within their hearts. When you succeed, when you rise like the sun after a long night, they do not bow in gratitude for your light. Instead, they seek to cloud it, to diminish it, to make it seem small. The Buddha taught, mudita, the divine quality of sympathetic joy, the ability to feel genuine happiness for the happiness of others. It is said that those who master mudita find a wellspring of peace that cannot be shaken by the winds of comparison. For when we rejoice in the success of another, we affirm the boundless abundance of life itself. Yet those who are still prisoners of creating an ego see the success of another not as a gift to the world, but as a theft from their own imagined store. When a person responds to your achievements with coldness, sarcasm, or attempts to overshadow your light, recognize that they are not truly responding to you. They are wrestling with their own deep dissatisfaction, the endless hunger of self that forever fears it is not enough. Their spirit, caught in the snares of tanha, craving, sees your joy not as a reminder of life's beauty, but as a threat to their fragile sense of worth. Dear one, do not take their reaction as a measure of your success. The fruit does not question its sweetness because the envious refuse to taste it. Walk your path with humility, yes, but also with quiet confidence. Understand that your flowering is not meant to provoke comparison. It is simply the natural expression of your journey, your karma unfolding. If you shrink your light to comfort those trapped in darkness, you serve neither them nor yourself. Instead, shine gently, steadfastly, without arrogance but without apology. In doing so, you may even become a silent invitation for others to awaken from their own bitterness and remember the joy of simply being. Thus, the wise cultivates sympathetic joy, like a lamp that lights other lamps without itself being diminished. In celebrating the happiness of others, we free ourselves from the chains of envy. And in the quiet knowing that another's success takes nothing away from our own, we taste the boundless, unfathomable peace of the awakened heart. 3. Using false praise. There is a subtle poison that wears the mask of sweetness, the weapon of false praise. In the worldly path, not all that glitters is gold, and not every kind word is born from sincerity. Some offer their compliments not as a mirror of your goodness, but as a snare, delicately woven to bind you with threads of obligation. The Buddha spoke of right speech, words that are true, timely, gentle, and spoken with pure intent. Yet those who dwell in the shadow of self-interest use words not to uplift, but to manipulate. They shower you with flattery, not because they rejoice in your virtues, but because they seek to plant a debt within your heart, a silent pressure that one day they intend to harvest. Such flattery is like a river that sparkles only on the surface, while beneath it hides treacherous currents. You may find yourself feeling special, uniquely understood, elevated, and yet soon after, there comes the quiet expectation, a favor asked, a boundary pressed, a burden laid upon you as though it were a small and natural return for such overflowing praise. Dear one, know this, true kindness demands nothing. True recognition asks for no payment. If a compliment leaves you feeling indebted rather than uplifted, it is wise to pause and look deeper. The Dhammapada reminds us, as a solid rock is not shaken by the wind, so the wise are not moved by praise or blame. Let your heart be like that unmoved rock, gracious, but unentangled. Receive genuine praise with humility, and let it pass through you like a clear breeze. But where you sense exaggeration, where you feel your inner freedom begin to shrink under the weight of obligation, awaken your mindfulness. Know that your worth does not increase with another's approval, nor does it decrease without it. You are already complete, beyond the judgments and games of the world. Thus, through clear seeing and steady heart, you will not fall into the subtle traps of false praise. You will walk your path in freedom, honoring sincere kindness, yet never trading your inner peace for the fleeting illusions offered by those who flatter only to ensnare. 4. Being self-centered. In the vast weave of human connections, a true relationship is like two hands joined in mutual support, giving and receiving in quiet rhythm, each nourishing the other without calculation. Yet in the tangled wounds of the world, there are those who know only how to take, whose hearts, caught in the thorns of self-centeredness, cannot see beyond their own hungers. Such individuals approach relationships not as fields to be tended with care, but as wells from which they endlessly draw. They speak much of their needs, their troubles, their victories, but listen little, give little, and seldom notice the offerings of your heart unless they serve their own desires. To them, your time, your energy, your compassion become commodities, not gifts freely honored. The Buddha taught, just as a bee gathers nectar and moves on without harming the flower, so should the wise walk through the world. Yet those bound by the illusion of a separated, grasping self cannot move lightly. They consume the generosity of others without gratitude, and in their wake, they leave the withering of trust, of joy, of the spirit that once reached out with open hands. Dear one, when you find yourself always giving and seldom receiving, when your spirit feels drained rather than nourished by another's presence, it is a gentle signal from life itself. The balance has been broken. Compassion must be bound to wisdom, or else it becomes a path to self-exhaustion. To give without expectation is noble, but to give without discernment is to pour precious water into a broken vessel. In the Sangha, the community of wise friends, we are taught to walk with those who lift one another, who give and receive with open hearts, creating a shared field of strength and serenity. Do not close your heart because others have taken too much. Instead, strengthen it with wisdom. Tend to your own roots first, so that when you give from fullness, not from depletion. Know that love and friendship, in their truest forms, are rivers that nourish both banks, not deserts that drain the spring. Thus, by listening deeply to the quiet language of balance within you, you protect your peace without bitterness, and you walk onward, offering kindness where it may bloom, and withdrawing with grace where it withers. In this way, your spirit remains light, your journey remains true, and your heart, though tested by the world, remains unbroken. 5. Exploiting your kindness. In the tender heart of compassion lies great strength, yet when left unguided by wisdom, even compassion can be turned against itself. There are those in this world, ensnared by greed and blindness, who see the kindness of others not as a mirror to inspire their own goodness, but as an endless resource to be consumed. They come to you not in true fellowship, but in silent calculation. With each request for help, with each favor asked without gratitude or intention to reciprocate, they slowly transform the sacred act of giving into a heavy burden. They call upon your generosity again and again, but when your hour of need arises, their hearts are nowhere to be found, like leaves scattered by a selfish wind. The Buddha spoke often of balanced giving, dana, a generosity that is free, joyful, and wise. He warned that giving should not be a chain that binds the giver, nor an exploitation by the taker. True giving uplifts both the one who gives and the one who receives. It is a sacred dance of mutual recognition. But when kindness is met only with taking, the natural harmony is broken. Dear one, recognize the signs. If your hands are always extended outward, while no hand ever reaches back to you, if your spirit feels slowly emptied by another's endless demands, if you find yourself weighed down by a sense of obligation rather than lifted by the joy of offering, then heed the quiet wisdom arising within. Kindness must be guided by clarity, or else it becomes an invitation for exploitation. Setting boundaries is not an act of cruelty, but an act of love, love for yourself, and love for the purity of giving itself. The Buddha taught that true compassion is fearless, It does not fear saying no when saying yes would nourish delusion or harm. To allow oneself to be endlessly drained is not generosity, it is forgetting the sacredness of one's own life. Thus, walk gently but firmly. Offer your help where it is received with gratitude and honored in spirit. And where you are merely used without care, withdraw your energy without anger, like a river that changes its course to nourish more fertile ground. In doing so, your kindness remains a blessing, pure, joyful, and free, never a chain, never a burden, never a tool in the hands of the ungrateful. 6. Trying to isolate you. In the dark forest of human entanglements, there are those who, driven by fear and craving for control, seek not to walk alongside you, but to encircle you, cutting you off from the light of others, binding you to their will alone. Such is the cruelty of isolation, a slow and silent theft of the soul's freedom. The Buddha, with boundless compassion, spoke often of the importance of noble friendship, Kalyanamita, for the path to awakening is not meant to be walked alone. It is through the mirrors of family, of true friends, of wise companions, that we remember who we are when the storms of delusion arise. To sever a being from their circle of love is to weaken their spirit, to make their heart easier to shape, to control. Those who seek to isolate you begin not with harsh commands, but with subtle doubts. They don't understand you like I do, they whisper. Or, your friends are jealous, your family holds you back. At first, their words seem like concern, a tender hand on your shoulder. But slowly, quietly, they weave a web of mistrust, and one by one, the bridges between you and those who truly care are weakened, then burned. Dear one, be mindful. True love does not imprison, it frees. True friendship does not demand your loyalty at the cost of others, it encourages you to flourish in many gardens. Where there is control, there is fear. Where there is genuine care, there is space for your spirit to breathe, to choose, to grow. If you find yourself pulled away from those who once nourished your heart, if guilt and pressure begin to replace joy and ease, recognize this for what it is, not love, but attachment disguised as affection. It is the old dance of ego, seeking to possess rather than to accompany. The Buddha likened spiritual community to a raft across the great river of suffering. Alone, the crossing is perilous. Together, with the support of many steady hands, the journey becomes lighter. Likewise, in worldly life, we thrive not in isolation but in connection, connections rooted in trust, compassion, and freedom. Thus, guard your relationships with mindfulness. Nurture the ties that uplift your being, and do not allow anyone, however sweet their words, to wall you off from the great sky of life. For in the end, it is not through obedience, but through wise companionship, that the heart finds its way home, open, courageous, and free. 7. Keeping you in a state of confusion. In the ever-shifting sands of human interaction, there are those who deliberately weave confusion, not to guide, but to ensnare. Their words are inconsistent, their actions unpredictable, their promises fragile as mist. When you are near them, certainty crumbles, and the clear mirror of your own knowing becomes clouded with doubt. This is no accident. It is the silent strategy of those who seek power over the hearts of others by first unseating their trust in themselves. The Buddha taught, one must be a lamp unto oneself, for the world is full of illusions, and among the greatest of them is the illusion crafted by those who manipulate perception. Such people will say one thing today, another tomorrow. They will deny the promises made, twist meanings, and blame you for your confusion. Gradually, like a traveler lost in fog, you begin to question not only what you see, but even whether you have the right to trust your own eyes. Dear one, understand, confusion is not your natural state. It is a signal, a sacred call from within, that something is not aligned with truth. In the clarity of mindful awareness, reality is simple, direct, and kind. Where there is chronic confusion, where trust becomes tangled, and where certainty feels ever out of reach, there lies manipulation, not love. Those who cause confusion seek to unseat your inner compass so that you lean on theirs. But in doing so, they sever you from your own ground of being, the silent knowing that no words can distort. Once separated from this inner refuge, you become vulnerable to their influence, chasing the shifting winds of their moods and judgments. Yet the Dharma teaches, what is true can be known by its fruits. Truth brings peace, steadiness, and luminous certainty, even amidst the uncertainties of life. Falsehood brings anxiety, disorientation, and fear. If your heart feels more clouded the longer you walk beside someone, it is a sign not to cling tighter, but to step back, to return to your own center. Be like the wise lotus, which rises above the muddy waters without becoming stained. Trust what you know in your still moments. Trust the whisper of your own clarity beneath the noise. In doing so, you reclaim the sacred ground upon which no deceit can tread. You see clearly again, and with clarity, you walk freely, no longer entangled in the shifting shadows cast by another's fear. 8. Making you doubt your own worth. In the quiet chambers of the heart, self-worth is like a tender flame. It must be guarded with mindfulness and nourished with wisdom. Yet there are those, lost in their own suffering, who seek not to nurture, but to extinguish this light in others. Through small, seemingly harmless words, through subtle dismissals and endless criticisms, they chip away at your confidence, until you stand before yourself like a stranger, questioning your own value. The Buddha spoke clearly, you, yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. Yet when we walk among those who drip poison into our minds, we begin to forget this simple truth. Their strategy is not a sudden strike, but a slow erosion. A comment here about your incompetence. A remark there about your inadequacy. Over time, even the strongest mountain can be worn down by the persistent touch of water. Dear one, when you feel yourself shrinking in the presence of another, when their words leave you feeling smaller, more fragile, less whole, recognize this as a grave wound, not a reflection of your true nature. In the Dharma, the truth is clear. No one's opinion, no harsh word, no judgment can touch the boundless, luminous reality of who you are. You are not your failures. You are not your mistakes. You are the silent awareness in which all these passing forms arise and dissolve. Those who seek to diminish you are often fleeing their own sense of inadequacy. By making others small, they momentarily feel bigger. But their temporary satisfaction is a house built on sand, and it cannot last. If you allow their words to take root in your mind, you carry not only their ignorance but also their suffering. Thus, guard your heart with a shield of mindfulness. Listen deeply, and if the words you receive do not nourish the spirit, let them pass through you like the wind through an open window. Surround yourself with voices that reflect your true nature, not in flattery, but in honest recognition of your sacred worth. Remember, as single seed, given care, becomes a great tree. In the same way, as single act of self-trust, as single breath of self-compassion, can reignite the flame within you. Tend to that flame. Protect it. Let no one's bitterness convince you to doubt the profound truth. You are enough. You have always been enough. And no force in this world can alter the light that was placed in your soul since the beginning of time. 9. Disrespecting your boundaries. In the sacred unfolding of human life, boundaries are not walls built from fear, they are gardens tended by wisdom. A boundary is an act of love, both for oneself and for others, a clear knowing of where you end and where the freedom of another begins. Yet in this world, There are those who do not honor such spaces. Driven by their own hunger, their own blindness, they step carelessly, or willfully, into the fields of your peace, trampling upon what should be revered. The Buddha taught, respect is the root of peace. Without respect, even the most tender love decays into possession. Without respect, even friendship becomes a chain. Those who ignore your boundaries are not loving you, they are using you, seeing you not as a living being with sacred limits, but as a tool to fulfill their own unexamined needs. At first, their trespasses may seem small: an unexpected visit, an unwanted demand, a conversation pushed too far. They may laugh away your discomfort, excuse their intrusions with lightness: "I thought you wouldn't mind," or "I was just worried about you." But heed this well, dear one, when someone continually disregards your no, they are not listening to your spirit, they are listening only to their own desires. Your time, your space, your silence, these are treasures, and in the Dharma, they are to be honored. You are not selfish for protecting them. To honor your boundaries is to honor the life that was entrusted to you. It is to walk the path of mindful living, where each being is free to move within the sphere of their own true nature, without force, without violation. If you feel your energy drained, your heart burdened, your freedom shrinking because another will not respect the lines you have drawn, know that this is not the cost of love, it is a call to wisdom. Set your boundaries again, not with anger, but with unwavering clarity. Speak from the still place within you that does not waver for approval or fear rejection. And if they still refuse to hear, if they mock, guilt, or dismiss your needs, then step back, not in hatred, but in deep compassion for yourself. Some souls are not yet ready to honor another's freedom because they have not yet honored their own. Thus, by protecting your sacred ground, you walk not into isolation, but into deeper connection, connection with your true self, connection with those who understand that love does not trespass, but stands at the gate and waits, with open hands and open heart. In this way, your peace remains intact, and your journey unfolds with dignity and grace. 10. Constant criticism. In the delicate weaving of human speech, words can either be bridges or daggers. The Buddha taught that right speech is one that brings peace, truth, and understanding, never harm. Yet there are those who, cloaked in the garments of helpfulness, wield constant criticism like a blade, cutting not to heal but to wound, not to uplift but to diminish. They offer their judgments as if they are gifts, a correction here, a harsh observation there, always wrapped in the illusion of good intent. "I'm just being honest," they say. "It's for your own good." But the fruits of their words betray their true aim, for instead of feeling nourished, you are left bruised; instead of clarity, you are left doubting your own worth. Dear one, remember, true guidance strengthens the spirit, it does not crush it. Feedback rooted in compassion awakens wisdom, while relentless fault-finding awakens only fear and shame. Those who continually point to your flaws without offering their hand in kindness are not your teachers, they are prisoners of their own bitterness, projecting their inner dissatisfaction outward. In the Dharma, it is taught that the wise look first to themselves. Before pointing to the dust in another's eye, they cleanse the vision of their own. But those who criticize endlessly have not yet turned the mirror inward. In seeking to diminish you, they temporarily escape the uncomfortable sight of their own suffering. Thus, when you are faced with constant criticism disguised as concern, listen not only to their words but to the state they leave your heart in. Does their speech ignite your clarity and confidence? Or does it extinguish your spirit, leaving only self-doubt behind? Guard your heart well. Accept only the words that help you grow in dignity and compassion. Let the rest fall away, like dead leaves carried off by the river. You are not here to mold yourself into the small image others create from their own fears. You are here to unfold the great, boundless nature that was planted within you before you ever knew a single word of praise or blame. Walk on, then, with gentle pride. Where criticism is sharp and empty, offer silence. Where it is wise and loving, let it guide you. And in this way, you will protect the sacred temple of your own being, allowing no careless voice to tear down what the universe has so patiently built within you. 11. Playing the victim. And yet, dear one, as you walk this path with open heart and clear eyes, beware also of those who wear the heavy mask of the eternal victim. These are the ones who, when faced with the natural consequences of their own actions, turn swiftly away from responsibility and cast the blame outward, toward you, toward others, toward fate itself. In every hardship, they see not the seeds they themselves have sown, but the imagined cruelty of the world conspiring against them. The Buddha taught that each being is heir to their own karma, neither punished nor rewarded by an external hand, but shaped by the ripples of their own intentions and deeds. Yet those who are trapped in the posture of victimhood reject this truth. Instead of looking inward with courage, they turn their sorrow into a tool, a silent weapon meant to burden others with guilt. They speak in sighs and lamentations, painting themselves as the perpetual sufferer, so that your compassion becomes a leash. If you voice your own needs, they call you unkind. If you seek your own freedom, they accuse you of abandonment. And so you find yourself tangled in an invisible web, one spun not from true connection, but from silent, corrosive obligation. Dear one, recognize this for what it is, a distortion of the sacred gift of empathy. Compassion does not mean carrying the weight of another's refusal to heal. Love does not mean sacrificing your clarity on the altar of their endless grievances. To be deceived by false victimhood is to be led astray from your own path, entangled in cycles of guilt that were never yours to bear. Hold steady in the wisdom of the Dharma. True compassion listens but does not drown. True love offers a hand, but does not allow itself to be pulled under by another's refusal to stand. If a being refuses again and again to see their part in their own suffering, no amount of your sacrifice will awaken them. They must turn inward on their own. Thus, with gentle strength, release the burdens that are not yours. Offer kindness without enslavement. Offer patience without surrendering your truth. In doing so, you honor both yourself and the sacred possibility that one day, they too may awaken, not through your suffering, but through the quiet invitation of your unwavering, compassionate presence. In this way, you walk onward, not in anger, not in resentment, but in a luminous freedom that only wisdom can bring. 12. Controlling the narrative about you. And as you continue along this path of discernment, there is yet another shadow to recognize, the one who seeks to control the story of who you are. These beings, gripped by fear, envy, or deep inner insecurity, do not merely injure you in private, they reach into the hearts of others, sowing seeds of doubt, distortion, and mistrust. They twist your words, exaggerate your flaws, invent offenses you never committed, all to shape how the world sees you, not according to truth, but according to their wounded vision. The Buddha taught, false speech leads to ruin, for it cuts the roots of trust. Trust is sacred, the invisible bridge that joins hearts across the river of separateness. Those who manipulate your image seek to burn this bridge, leaving you stranded, isolated, easier to control or diminish. They know that when others doubt you, it weakens your support, it bruises your spirit, it tempts you to question your own worth. But dear one, hear this deeply, you are not the stories they tell. You are not the gossip whispered in corners. You are not the distorted reflection cast upon you by minds clouded with fear. You are the silent witness behind all appearances, untouched, unbroken, untainted by the dust others may throw into the winds. When you find yourself falsely portrayed, resist the temptation to respond with anger or frantic defense. The Dharma teaches that truth, like the sun, does not need to argue its existence. In time, what is false falls away, unable to sustain itself without constant feeding. But truth, your true being, remains steadfast, radiant, inevitable. Speak with clarity when necessary, yes. Defend your integrity with calm strength when the moment is right. But do not be drawn into the endless battle of appearances, where the eagle seeks to win but the spirit always loses. Stand firm in the silent knowing of who you are. Let your life itself, your conduct, your compassion, your steadiness, be your reply. Thus, you protect the sacred flame of your dignity. You remain rooted not in the shifting opinions of the world, but in a deep soil of truth. And by doing so, you walk beyond the reach of slander, like a great mountain unmoved by the howling winds, serene, upright, and at peace. 13. Exploiting your emotions. And further still along this journey of vigilance, you must learn to recognize those who skillfully manipulate your own emotions against you. These are the ones who, when confronted with the harm they cause, do not meet you with humility or reflection, but instead turn your heart against itself. They make you feel guilty for speaking your truth. They label you as too sensitive, too emotional, overreacting, so that the sharp sting of their actions is no longer their burden to bear, but yours. The Buddha taught, in this world, hate is never conquered by hate. It is conquered by love. Yet love is not blind submission. It is not allowing oneself to be bent and broken by the projections of those unwilling to face their own misdeeds. Those who twist your compassion into a weapon against you are not practicing love. They are fleeing from the mirror of their own conscience. Dear one, emotions are sacred messengers. They rise not to shame you, but to guide you, to show you where your spirit has been dishonored, where your boundaries have been crossed, where truth has been abandoned. When someone consistently causes pain and then blames you for feeling it, it is not your sensitivity that is the problem, it is their refusal to walk the noble path of accountability. To delve your feelings, to distrust your own heart, is to sever yourself from the very compass that was given to you to navigate the storms of samsara. Therefore, guard it well. Trust the inner stirring that says, "This is not right." Trust the unease that arises not from weakness, but from wisdom quietly speaking through the body, the breath, the trembling heart. And when they try to make you carry their shame, lay it down. It does not belong to you. You are not too much. You are not wrong for feeling deeply. You are alive, awake, and moving toward wholeness. Thus, in the spirit of true compassion, compassion first and foremost for your own sacred being, refuse to be made a prisoner by the guilt that others manufacture. Hold fast to the knowing that your emotions are not obstacles but lamps, lighting the way through the darkness of deception. Walk gently, but walk firmly. And in doing so, you preserve not only your peace, but the dignity of your own heart, untouched by the hands that once tried to shape it into something smaller than it was ever meant to be. 14. Always competing with you. And as the path unfolds before you, there is yet another form of suffering to recognize, the spirit that cannot simply rejoice with you, but must always strive to surpass you. These are the ones who, when faced with your joy, your growth, your success, do not bow in celebration but immediately reach for their own banner to wave higher. Your achievements, rather than inspiring gratitude, awaken in them a restless hunger to prove they are greater, better, more worthy. The Buddha taught, there is no fire like greed, no chain like delusion, no flood like craving. Those who constantly compare, who cannot bear another's light without trying to outshine it, are drowning in a flood of craving, the endless thirst to be seen as superior, the gnawing fear that their worth depends on standing above others. When you share your victories, they respond not with open arms, but with veiled boasts. I did something even better. That's good, but it's not as impressive as mine. Your moment of celebration becomes a silent contest you never entered, and your heart feels the quiet sting of being unseen, unacknowledged. Dear one, remember, the sacredness of your journey is not measured against another's path. Your light does not diminish because another refuses to honor it. Just as the moon does not envy the sun, nor the mountain the river, your soul need not compete to prove its beauty. It simply shines, by its very nature, by its very being. Those who must always one-up others are not your rivals, they are prisoners of their own illusion, the belief that life is a ladder to climb rather than a field where many flowers can bloom together. Their struggle is not truly with you, it is with a silent emptiness within them that no amount of trophies can ever fill. Meet their boasts with equanimity. Meet their comparisons with stillness. Do not enter their battle, for it is a battle against ghosts. Walk your own path with quiet pride, rooted not in being better, but in being true. Celebrate your growth without shrinking, and celebrate others without fear. Thus, you free yourself from the endless contest of egos. You leave behind a narrow, anxious race for superiority and step into the vast, open field of gratitude, where every being's light adds to the great, shimmering beauty of this world. In that field, there is no higher, no lower, only the infinite unfolding of life itself, and the deep, abiding peace of one who has nothing left to prove. Thus, dear one, as you journey through this ever-changing world, remember, there will always be those whose presence lifts your spirit and those whose presence weighs it down. Some will come into your life like gentle rain, nourishing the seeds of your true self. Others will arrive like storms, seeking to uproot and scatter what you have so patiently grown. This is the nature of samsara, a realm where both the kind and the unkind cross our path. The great teaching is not to close your heart, nor to harden it in bitterness, but to awaken the clear seeing of wisdom. To recognize early the signs of harm is not judgment, it is compassion, compassion first for yourself. Just as a traveler shelters from a storm, not out of hatred for the rain, but out of love for the flame he carries, so must you protect the peace within you. Trust your intuition, for it is the whisper of your deepest knowing. Set your boundaries as a loving guardian sets walls around a sacred garden, not to exclude life, but to honor it. And above all, never allow another's blindness to dim your own light. Your joy, your dignity, your quiet radiance, these are treasures entrusted to you by life itself. Hold them with care. Stand firm in their defense. Know in your heart, again and again, my peace is worth fighting for. And if these words touch the quiet place within you, I invite you to walk further with us. Leave a comment below, share your reflections, your experiences, your hopes. Subscribe to this humble space where wisdom is honored and the heart is heard. And let us continue together, lighting the path for one another, in kindness, in courage, and in peace. Until we meet again, guard your light well. It was given to you for a reason.